Boldwood presents The Last List of Mabel Beaumont, written by Laura Pearson and read by Penelope Freeman. The moral right of the author has been asserted. This performance is owned by Boldwood. Chapter 1. I've been standing by this kettle making tea for Arthur and me for 62 years. 2 different houses, God knows how many different kettles, but always me, always him, always a morning cup of tea. He's at the kitchen table, pen in hand, tackling the crossword. He's opened a window and I can hear birds chirruping in the garden. A blackbird, I think, and a robin. A whole conversation going on that means nothing to me. When I sit down, Arthur will fold the paper over and put his pen down and say, "Well," and we'll talk about what we're going to do with the day. A walk or a job or nothing much. In our working years, it was only the weekends we had to make these decisions. But now it's every day, stretching out ahead, hour stacked on hour. I drop in the tea bags, the milk already in my cup, but only added to his at the very end of the process. Half a sugar for him. Used to be 2, then 1. He would say, "Why deprive yourself at this age?" But I got it down all the same. Ollie's sniffing around my feet looking for crumbs I might have dropped. I reach down to pat his head, but he dodges out of the way, goes back to Arthur like always. He smells like the river, and I make a mental note to give him a bath soon. There's bread in the toaster and butter and jam on the side waiting, and there's something I want to say. Something I've been wanting to say now for decades about this life we've built. But the words are stuck. They're always stuck. I take the mugs over to the table, noticing how the steam rises and then drags itself in the direction I walk. "Well," Arthur says, folding the paper. "Any plans for today?" I shake my head and the toast pops up with a quiet clatter. "Tommy waits." There's always a funeral when you get to our age. Arthur used to cut Tommy's hair when he had the barber's shop, and they drank together at the Conservative Club sometimes. He's been to funerals with less of a connection than that. I never know whether he's going to pay his respects or just because it's an outing of sorts. Finger sandwiches and slightly stale crisps, a couple of whiskies for the road. "You go," I say. I barely knew him. "I'm sure Moira would be pleased to see you." You see, I wouldn't have been able to tell you his wife's name, so I'm quite sure my presence wouldn't make a difference to her one way or the other. His shoulders rise just a fraction, and I know he's annoyed. I'm an expert in his body language, as I'm sure he is in mine. You don't live side by side, alone, for more than 6 decades without learning a thing or two. "So, what will you do while I'm gone?" I could read or do some knitting or look through old photographs. I could just sit and think, go back over my memories, have a rake through my life, our lives. But Arthur doesn't approve of that kind of thing, thinks it's maudlin. Always look forward, that's his motto, or one of them. Me, I'm more about looking back, especially now there's so much back and so little forward left. What's wrong with spending your last years in quiet contemplation? It's too late to change the world, isn't it? That's the trouble between us. I'm winding down and he's still trying to go full throttle. I need to sort out that kitchen drawer that's sticking, I say.
Oh, yes, it's been driving me round the bend.
I don't say that it wouldn't have got stuck in the first place if he didn't keep putting things in it when it's clearly full. Takeaway menus we'll never use, and buttons and rolls of sticky tape, and who knows what else. I'll throw 80% of it away, and he'll be pleased and won't notice any of the things he was hoarding have disappeared, which goes to show he didn't need them in the first place. He holds his arms out in front of him for me to do his cufflinks.
Bill's old cufflinks, these,
he says, as he always does. I nod. Don't say that after 60-odd years they feel more like his to me than Bill's, despite the initials WM. William Mansfield. He's had that suit more than 30 years, and the trousers are a bit too tight. He smells like soap and water. Just clean. Just him.
You sure I can't change your mind?
He asks. I look at him, right in the eye, and wonder when I last did that. You spend so much time talking from different rooms, or one of you on the sofa and one in the doorway. When do you ever stand inches apart like this and really focus on each other? He's still got a full head of hair, though it's thinning, and it's still got a touch of sandy colouring mixed in with the white. His eyes are as blue as they were on our wedding day, when I looked into them at the altar, still hoping for a reason to back out. He's put weight on, of course. He's not that compact, muscular man I first knew. He's got jowls and a belly. It suits him, age. Because he's got a magical smile, always has, and when he flashes that, you don't really see anything else. I don't fancy it, I say. He nods, and I know he's thinking that I never fancy much anymore, that I've mostly given up on life. And it's true. It's funny. When you're choosing who to spend your life with, you don't think about how you'll both feel in your 80s, whether one of you will be ready to sit and wait for the end, while the other one's keen to cram in as much living as possible. But even when we were younger, this difference raged between us. Him always thinking he could make a difference. Me knowing I'm just one person in a wide world, and it doesn't much matter what I do.
Well, I'll see you later then.
I'll do a sausage casserole, I say, and we both know it's an olive branch. I follow him to the door and wait for him to speak, knowing he won't go until things are patched up between us.
I won't be too long,
he says, putting his arms around me. I feel the scratch of his stubble on my cheek and hope he'll pull away. And then he's gone. I take sausages, pared and neatly wrapped in cling film, out of the freezer and put them on the side to defrost. Next I tackle the drawer, being ruthless. If I don't know what it is, or it's not been used for months, it goes in the bin. It only takes an hour, and then I'm about to get my book out. But Ollie keeps going over to the door and looking mournful, and I know he'd reach up and put his lead on himself if he could. Come on then, boy, I say, and I get us both ready for a walk. It's one of those bright, cold October days. Dry at least, but I know my hands will be stiff and cold as a stone by the time I get home. We go to the end of the lane and then towards the centre of town. I've lived here in this small Surrey town my entire life. Walked this route so often I'm sometimes surprised my footsteps aren't imprinted on the tarmac. Ollie doesn't care as long as there are things to sniff, other dogs to growl at, and somewhere he can relieve himself, which he's doing now. I wait for him to finish, and then reach down with the bag, and for a horrible minute I think I'm not going to be able to get up again. But then something clicks, and I'm upright. I look at Ollie, who's eager to get going again. How long until we can't look after him? When Arthur talked me into getting him 3 years ago, after writing a very well-considered pros and cons list, I said he might well outlive us both, and Arthur shook his head at me as if he simply didn't understand why I'd bring that up.
"Sometimes you talk as if we're already dead,"
he said. I've always remembered that. We go on, Ollie and me, past that new fancy bakery that smells of icing sugar and ginger, and the hairdressers where Arthur's barber shop used to be, past the little supermarket with its sliding doors that open even if you're just walking by, as if they're part of a plan to lure people in, and the carpenters. Cigarette butts litter the pavement. I pull my wool coat a bit tighter around me and hurry along, hoping Arthur won't see me through the window and come out. It's changed a bit, Broughton, over the years. It's always had everything I need, though, with the occasional trip to Overbury for clothes or furniture. London is less than an hour away, but I've only ever been about once a year. Broughton is mostly enough. The shops thin out and I cross the road, take the little path up to the church. I walk among the gravestones until I find them. My family. There's Bill, who went first, though he shouldn't have. Full of life one day and gone the next. One of those hidden heart conditions you hear about and never expect your brother to fall victim to. Then Mother, 10 years later. She never got over his death, and though she officially died of cancer, it was quite clear to me that she gave up and started dying very slowly the day she heard her boy was gone. And then Dad, less than a year after her. Stroke. All over in a minute. Does it count as being orphaned if it happens when you're in your 30s? Arthur's mother treated me like one of her own, but I was always aware of the fact that if I lost him, I'd be alone in the world. I don't think Arthur's ever really understood that. He was one of 9, and he's always had siblings and cousins all over the place. All our lives, wherever we talked about going on our holidays, he'd have a cousin there, and they'd meet up for a drink or dinner, and they'd always have that same Beaumont look, sandy hair and freckles. My parents were both only children, so we were a unit of 4, now whittled down to 1. There are leaves all over the stones in reds and oranges. I can't see Mother's dates or Dad's full name, but it's so pretty, this autumn scene, that it doesn't matter. I know those things anyway, don't I? And I've never really seen the point of sweeping leaves. Nature won't be outdone. I look over my shoulder to check there's no one around before I speak. It's Mabel, Just passing with Ollie. There was something in the paper yesterday about people's collections, and I showed it to Arthur and he chuckled. Said he used to slip them out of your folder and hide them sometimes for a joke, and you'd get all het up and sulk for days. What would you collect now, I wonder? If you were still here and you'd stuck with the stamps, you'd have thousands by now. I've kept them for you, up in the loft. Lord knows why. I suppose they'll get thrown out when Arthur and I go, like everything else. Tears spring to my eyes and take me by surprise. I always have a quiet word with them when I come by here, and I don't usually get emotional. Perhaps I'm coming down with something or need a good night's sleep. These days I tend to turn like a chicken on a spit for hours before I can settle down. I head home and wait for Arthur to return. It's funny. I don't mind him going out. Don't mind my own company. But I like him coming back too. I like hearing his stories. The house feels different when he's not in it, as if all our furniture and belongings settle and wait, like a breath held. It's nearly 4 when I hear the scrape of his key in the lock. He's opened his shirt collar and loosened his tie, and he's had a few to drink by the look of him. Was it all right? I ask.
It was. He had a good life, Tommy. Lots of people there to see him off. Do you think there'll be many there for us when it's our turn?
He sits on the sofa and Ollie comes running in to be fussed.
Hello, dog,
Arthur says. Ollie's always liked him the most. I watch Arthur reach down to scratch behind his ears, the way both of their faces relax. I think about what he asked. For him, surely some of those family members will come, drifting in from all corners of the country. And there's all his old clients and the men he drinks with, those who are left. For me, I'm not so sure. What's got you thinking about that? I ask, but it's a stupid question because the answer is obvious.
Tommy and Moira had 4 children, and they were all there with their husbands and wives, and then their children. Just got me thinking, that's all.
It's too late to go back and change anything.
Tea?
He asks, getting up and disappearing from the room. Yes, please. And all the rest of the day, I know we're both thinking about the children we didn't have. Chapter 2.
There's a market on in Overbury,
Arthur says, tapping the teaspoon against the edge of the mug before he brings the tea to the kitchen table. What sort of market?
Food, I think. Fancy a run out?
I could say no. I want to. But he's trying to involve me, and it isn't fair to knock him back over and over. The last 10 years of our marriage have been like that, in a way. Him offering something up, me batting it back. It wasn't always this way, and that's the trouble. We both remember when we were partners in crime. Sounds good, I say. He tries to pretend he isn't surprised, tucks into his bran flakes. The first problem is finding somewhere to park. For years, neither of us could drive, and then Arthur learned when he was in his 50s, because he likes a challenge. He passed first time after a steady 6 months of lessons, but he's never had much confidence. He drives with his worried face permanently plastered on. What about over there? I suggest, as we circle the car park for the second time. The low winter sun is making it hard to see. I think there's
a Minnie in it,
he says, his jaw tight. We could go back, if you prefer. It's a fine line I'm walking. I want him to know he doesn't have to suffer this stress for me. But I don't want him to think I'm looking for excuses to cut the outing short. He doesn't say anything. A young couple walk back to their car, hand in hand, and he waits, the indicator clicking. When we get out of the car, I think about taking his hand. How long is it since we walked through the streets like that, declaring our union? We certainly did it in the early years. But I don't remember when it stopped. Was there a day when he reached for my hand and I pulled away? Or dropped, then never picked it up again? Though we're walking side by side, shoulder to shoulder, it seems too big a gulf to cross now, too huge a gesture. There are market stalls up and down the length of the high street, smells competing for space. Candy floss and spicy meat and fresh bread, a buzz of chatter and the occasional shout of a stallholder.
Get your fresh pastries here. All bowls of fruit or veg, £1.50. We've got pineapples, we've got mangoes, we've got cherries. Fresh fish caught this morning.
I nudge Arthur. Remember the fishmonger and the shrimps at Morecambe Bay? It's an invitation to visit the past with me, and I hope he'll take it. I hope he'll remember the better times. His face cracks wide open and he laughs.
That man was wasted up there with that voice.
We're silent for a moment, memories spooling between us. There are so many, and perhaps we can live off them. Shall we pick up a pie for dinner? And there isn't much fruit in the bowl. Arthur pulls a crumpled piece of paper out of his jacket pocket. Of course, he's made a list. We choose apples and oranges, and then he points to what I think is a mango, raises his eyebrows. Go on then, I say. Where does he get it from, this eternal zest for trying new things? I admired it when I first met him, when he was just Bill's friend who was interested in everything. At the pie stand, we weigh up beef and onion against chicken and ham, and then I hear a voice calling his name. Arthur Beaumont, is that you? We turn, and it's a woman of about our age. She looks like she might once have been pretty, but it's hard to tell with the wrinkles crowding out her features. When she smiles, her teeth look too white. She puts one arm on Arthur's and goes up on tiptoes to kiss his cheek, and then she does the same to me, and she smells of roses and soap.
Joan Jenkins, he says. Well, I never.
She shakes her head and laughs. I haven't heard that name in a while. It's been Joan. I can't place her, but the name seems familiar. So, you two got married then? She tips her head in my direction, and then Arthur's.
We did indeed,
he says, turning to me with a proud smile.
62 years.
She shakes her head. Well, shows what I know. I thought you weren't suited. Arthur laughs, and they carry on chatting, but I zone out and just hear that line about us not being suited over and over on a loop. Next thing I know, she's waving a hand and walking away, and Arthur's back to looking at the pies. "Who was she?" I ask. "I mean, should I remember her?"
"She was just always around in the old days. At the dances. Dot knew her a bit, I think."
It's a long time since I've heard him say Dot's name. It startles me. But the moment is over in a flash. Still, for a few seconds I was back there, sitting at the side of the hall next to Dot, whispering about what the other girls were wearing and whose arms people might spend the evening in. I could hear the band, feel the sweat creeping from under my arms, and every time I saw a couple kissing in a darkened corner, I wanted it to be me. I wanted to know what it felt like to lose yourself like that in another person, or to try to.
"She had a bit of a thing for me, I think,"
Arthur says as we move away from the stall with our chosen pie in a paper bag. I stop walking. "Dot?" Arthur chuckles.
"No, Joan. Sounds like she married John Garnett in the end, though. Did you hear her say she lost him last year?"
I shake my head. I didn't hear anything after her saying she didn't think we were suited.
"Fancy. She's been living here in Overbury all these years, and we've never run into her before today."
I might have run into her before. I might have stood next to her at the bus stops and in butcher's queues and at the bank, and I wouldn't have known her. But I know what he means. Sometimes it feels like the world is unimaginably big, and other times it feels... Back at home, we drink tea, and Ollie curls up with Arthur on the sofa, and I see that Arthur's going to nod off. It's the fresh air. I watch them from my armchair in the window as his mouth drops open slightly. I feel a rush of affection for this man I've spent my life with. I could have chosen so much worse. He's kind, reliable, and that love of life he has, that's probably kept us both afloat a few times. Because there have been tough years. There will always be tough years in a marriage this long, it's guaranteed. The best you can hope is you have someone who cares enough to weather them with you. But I can't help thinking, what if he'd married Joan Jenkins? He said himself she had a thing for him, and it seemed likely from the way she was looking at him this morning, all these years later. Joan, who thought we weren't matched, and who was right in a lot of ways. Joan, who might have loved him the way I never could, might have given him the children he longed for, might have been a comfort and a fellow adventurer in his later years, rather than someone always holding him back. Might have been simply a better choice. When he asked me to be his wife, standing on the street corner on the way back from the first dance I went to after Bill's death, the light fading and his eyes wide with fear, I didn't think about what would happen to him if I said no. But perhaps I should have done. Because what I saw as breaking his heart might really have been setting him free, setting him on the path to find the girl who was right for him, whether that was Joan Jenkins or someone he hadn't met yet. When I said yes, and I was screaming no inside, I thought I was doing the best I could for him. But now I'm not so sure. He wakes after half an hour and shakes his head in that funny way he always does, as if to get rid of the last remnants of sleep.
I'd better take this one out for a walk, hadn't I? Come on then, dog.
He doesn't ask if I want to come along. He knows one outing a day is more than enough for me. I get someone young and rich and full of energy. I've always loved that about reading, being able to experience a different time or place, but mostly getting a chance to experience being a different person altogether, one who's braver, who knows what she wants and reaches for it without apology, or one who doesn't have regrets. How different would my life have been if I'd been a different sort of person? Then he's back, clutching at his chest, the colour gone from his face. Arthur? I'm up and out of my chair. What is it? Should I call the doctor?
No, he says. Let me get my breath.
I steer him to the sofa and he sits. I'm panicked, unsure what to do. This is one of the reasons I would have made a terrible mother. I don't know what to do when the unexpected happens. Are you all right? I ask when a couple of minutes have passed. Ollie is sitting at Arthur's feet, watchful, his lead still on.
I just came over a bit funny, that's all. Indigestion, maybe. I'm all right now, Mabel. I'm all right.
I fuss over him, give him the newspaper to read while I cook the dinner, put the softest blanket over his knees. When you're young and one of you is ill, you know it's likely nothing serious. But at this age, every symptom wields the power to terrify. We've talked over the years about how we'd like to go. Just like most people, I suppose, quickly, if at all possible, with our dignity and our minds intact. But you don't get to choose, do you? I've always thought I'd be first. I'm not sure why. He'd get on fine without me after a while. I know he'd be heartbroken, but he'd get past it. He's not bad in the kitchen and he's got plenty of friends who'd rally round. But me, without him, I'm not sure I'd know how to go on. I think I'd just forget to eat lunch or get out of bed without him to rally me. Do you want this pie? I ask. Or do you not feel like eating? I've warmed it through and boiled some carrots and green beans, and the smell wafting from the kitchen is thick and meaty.
Just a small slice for me, please.
It isn't like him. He's the kind to pile his plate high if it's something he likes, and there's nothing he likes more than pie. We don't say much while we eat. We've passed so many meals together like this, sometimes with the radio on low, sometimes in silence. But tonight the quiet hangs heavy, and I'm looking forward to going up to bed, to putting the day to rest and starting again tomorrow. I find him in the garden just before 7, sitting on the bench. I sit next to him, follow his gaze.
Nice one tonight,
he says. There's just a hint of pink, making the clouds look like candy floss. We watch in silence as the sun inches lower and lower. When we're in bed, he reaches a hand across the space between us for the first time in a long time. Rested on my thigh.
Seen Joan today. It made me think,
he says. Here it is. The different path his life could have taken, the different wife, Will he actually say it? Oh, yes.
Those were good days, when Bill was still alive and Dot was here, and the four of us would go dancing together. I'm glad we had those.
There are tears in my eyes. My brother Bill and my best friend Dot, when it was all laughter and joking and a whole lifetime ahead, and we didn't care if we made mistakes or took the wrong path, because there was an eternity to straighten it all out. And then we learned that there wasn't an eternity, at least not for Bill. And we all broke in our different ways. Dot disappeared. Arthur was in a hurry to settle down. And I went along with it. Good days, I say into the darkness. But I think he's already asleep. Chapter 3. I know the second I wake that he's gone. He's lying on his back, looking just as peaceful as usual. I know that if I reach out and touch him, he'll be cold. So I don't do it. Not at first. I prop myself up with pillows and I talk to him like I would on any other morning. I tell him that I slept quite well, and I hope he did too. I even go downstairs and make a cup of tea. Arthur? I say, my voice a bit strangled. I really should have called the doctor when you had those chest pains yesterday. I could see you weren't yourself. But you didn't make a fuss, did you? You never made a fuss. It wasn't your way. My words are met with silence, of course. Did you know? And if you knew, how long for? Just yesterday? Or have you known for a while? Have you felt things caving in? I wish you'd said something. I examine that, turn it around, put it under an internal microscope. Do I wish that? What would I have done differently if he'd told me he thought he was going to die? Would I have kissed him, or held him, or thanked him for the years he gave me? Would I have been less snappy, more patient? I'll never know. When I touch him and know for sure, I'll have to make a telephone call, and the world will come crashing in. So I'll hold it off another half an hour. Me and Arthur. Me drinking a cup of tea with him in bed. Our last one. It's been just the two of us for so many years. People don't talk much about marriages without children, about the intensity of them. No one else in the house to act as a buffer, to force you to come together after an argument. There was a time when it seemed everyone I knew was having children, and then I lost them all to that life. It's not for the faint-hearted parenting. Years and years of care and attention. And there was Arthur and me, still just us. Always just us. When Mum found him cold in his bed one Sunday morning at the age of 25, she screamed and screamed. And then I went up the stairs to find out what was wrong, thinking the cat had brought a mouse in or something. She was standing there in his bedroom. And when I looked at him, I saw that there was nothing there, in his face. And I screamed too. It was violent, a wrench. The way the death of someone young should be, I suppose. But Arthur has had his life, long and mostly happy. He always said he counted himself lucky to live in a safe country and have a roof over his head. He didn't begrudge me the things I didn't give him, the children he never got to meet. Or if he did, he kept quiet about it. 89. It's a good age. And you were still you right up to the end, weren't you? No forgetting or confusion or pain. That's as much as you can hope for, I think. I wonder for a moment whether he's watching me, whether he's looking down laughing at me talking to his empty shell of a body, whether he's with Bill or his parents or mine. And that's what jolts me into action. I finish my tea and I force myself to put my warm hand on his cold one. It's a shock, even though I know what to expect. It doesn't feel like him. The first time he held my hand, we were dancing. Bill and Dot had taken to the floor and Arthur had looked at me a little shyly and tilted his head to ask. And I'd nodded, stepped towards him. We were clumsy together, no grace. But I remember the warmth of his hand and the size of it, how my hand almost got lost in it, how he smelled clean and like comfort, and I remember feeling safe and protected. Now, in this bed we've shared for years, he's not himself. He's gone. His body, which carried him for almost 9 decades, is useless and empty. "Oh, Arthur," I say, my voice catching. And then I go downstairs and telephone the doctor because I don't know what else to do, who else to call. The receptionist says she'll sort and tells me that once that's done I should call a funeral director to ask them to move the body. And I thank her. But then once I've put the telephone down, I find that I'm sobbing. Great gulping sobs that keep coming and coming like waves. Because now it's really true. And they will come and take him away. And what will I do then? Who will I be without him? The doctor's visit is quick and sombre. It's a doctor I've never seen. They're always changing. When he leaves, he says how sorry he is, and I nod an acknowledgement, not sure my voice will hold. Then I fetch the iPad to look up funeral homes in Broughton. There are 2, and I call the first one. A man I speak to has a kind voice, and he says they can come for him in an hour's time. Is that enough? I don't know what to say because I want him gone and I want him here at the same time. I can't bear the thought of that body that isn't him being upstairs in the bed for any longer than necessary. But I'm not ready to be someone who lives alone, a widow. I sigh and say an hour is fine, and then I go back upstairs to tell him. "Someone's coming to get you, Arthur," I say, sitting on the edge of the bed and touching his hand again. I didn't touch him enough. He said that sometimes in the early years, that I wasn't very affectionate. But we're all different, aren't we? And it isn't always easy to change. He hasn't said it for a long time. I catch a slightly stale smell and go to open a window wide. The wind catches the curtain and drags the edge of it outside. I don't pull it back in. I look at the cold cup of tea I made for him on the bedside table. Couldn't bring myself to just make the one. I think of all the tea we've drunk, how he'd always say that I made the perfect cup, just how he liked it, though I never did anything special. He was grateful, appreciative, not just about that, but about anything I did for him. About me agreeing to be his, I think. A memory creeps in. We were in our 30s and he still looked hopeful and fresh. We were in the kitchen of our first house cooking together. Him chopping leeks and onions with a sharp knife, me peeling potatoes. The radio was on, playing one love song after another. A breeze snaked through the open window. He put his knife down and washed his hands before wiping his eyes. "Onions got you?" I asked. He nodded, came over to stand behind me, circled my waist with his hands, and then his hot breath was on my neck and he was kissing me, trying to turn my body to face his. Did it just come over him, this sudden lust? I let him turn me, let him kiss my lips and my neck. He reached for the front of my dress, started undoing the buttons. "Not here," I said, clumsily trying to do them back up. He was faster than me, more nimble. "Here," he said, and his voice was urgent and I almost laughed. His hands were everywhere, roaming, and all I could think about was the potatoes lying there behind me, half peeled. Arthur pressed his erection against me and groaned low in my ear. I wanted him to stop, but I didn't say, not at first. "I Want to Hold Your Hand" came on, and it was the first time I'd heard the Beatles, and it felt like a change was coming. Or does it just feel that way now, looking back? I almost tumble out of the memory then, but not quite. Arthur lifted me and carried me through to the front room, where he laid me on the sofa before yanking the curtains closed. I was naked before I found my voice. "Stop," I said. He pulled back, looked at me with eyes that were glazed. "What is it?" I felt silly, cold. I reached for my dress on the floor and covered myself with it. I'm not in the mood," I said. He kept looking at me as if he was trying to work something out, and then he pulled his trousers up and disappeared upstairs without a word. When he came down, I was dressed and back in the kitchen, the potatoes peeled and chopped. "I hoped he wouldn't bring it up," he said. "No," I agreed. He was right, I couldn't, and yet... "I love you, Mabel. You're my wife. I want to make love to you." "I know, What? What is there to say?" "I'm sorry," I said. I looked at him and there was a muscle twitching near his jaw. For one awful second I thought he might hit me, and then I came back to myself and remembered that he was Arthur, and he would never. I think about the words I've wanted to say to him every day we've spent together. Perhaps his death has dislodged them. But no, they're still stuck. I would say them to him now if I could. It would be better than nothing. "I love you," I say. It's a funny kind of truth. I didn't love him at first, but I grew to. Not passionate love, not the kind of love people talk about dying for. More a love built brick by brick, a love made of appreciation and shared grief and kindness. He was a good man. Such a good man. When the doorbell goes, it feels too soon. I tell him where I'm going, that I'll be back, but I'll have them with me, and they're going to take him. I know he isn't there, but I can't help giving him a running commentary all the same. I speak to him as if he's a child, as I would have spoken to a child. I'm here, Arthur, I tell him. Don't forget. 2 men, both in their 30s, I'd say. They introduce themselves as Steve and Mark. One tall and slim, one short and stocky, like a comedy double act. They're polite, respectful. They tell me how sorry they are. This is their job and they do it well. But I can't imagine why anyone would choose it. How it would come up on anyone's list of desired occupations. Perhaps it doesn't. Perhaps it's more the kind of job you find yourself in that you fall into. I busy myself making them tea, though they tell me not to worry. I find some hobnobs in the cupboard. When they're ready to take him, they ask if I'd like to say goodbye and stay downstairs to drink the tea to give me a bit of privacy. But I haul myself up, go back into the room. Will I ever walk in here without thinking of his body lying here? Will I ever just think of it as our bedroom, or my bedroom again? I don't want to move house, but I don't want to be haunted by this memory either. It's time, I say. They're going to take care of you. You'd like them. They're smartly dressed and clean-shaven. It all feels too quick after the slow eking out of the years we've lived together. To be saying goodbye like this when just yesterday we were shopping for fruit. In the kitchen, in the fruit bowl, there's a mango that will never be eaten. I will let it sit there and rot, and then I'll throw it away. Will we have buried him by then? Will I be coping? I lean down, kiss his forehead. They were good days, I whisper, echoing our last conversation. So many good days. I go back down and tell them I'm ready, and I stay at the back of the house in the kitchen while they carry him out. One of them has taken a hobnob, and there are a few crumbs on the side, so I get a cloth and wipe it down. There are things to do, and they leave me with a little folder with various forms and leaflets in it. But I can't think about that yet. I can only think 2 things, 2 separate thoughts, one and then the other, then back to the first. I should never have married him. I am on my own. Chapter 4. It's quiet after they've gone, and I don't know what to do with myself. I feel jumpy, unable to sit down. Is that adrenaline? I open his drawers, look at his underpants and socks neatly paired. See him standing here, right where I am, choosing socks from the drawer and resting his right hand on the chest while he pulls on the left one before switching over. How is it possible that I'll never see him do that again? I'm still in my nightdress and slippers, but part of me is frightened of getting into the bed where he died. I don't believe in curses or ghosts or anything of that nature, but the thought of lying where he died makes me shiver. So I go through to the spare room, the room we made nice for the guests who never really came after it was clear there would be no nursery. But no, that isn't right either. I take a deep breath and return to our bedroom, stand at the end of the bed. Shortly after we got married, we had a conversation about the "what's mine is yours" part of the vows. Arthur said he wanted us to share everything, that he didn't want us to have anything that was just his or mine. I said that was silly, that there were always going to be things we each had, and when he asked me for an example, I said, sides of the bed. "Let's swap," he said. "What?" "Every few weeks or months, we'll swap which side we sleep on." We did too. Every 6 months we turned the mattress over because it's something my mother had always done, and Arthur would take my book and my night cream from the bedside table and swap them with his bits and pieces. I wonder whether I'll always sleep on the same side now that he died on the other one. I get into bed and fall into a sleep so deep that coming up out of it a few hours later feels like a kind of rebirth. I didn't dream of him. That sleep was a black hole. And that's a comfort. It's when I go back downstairs that I spot it. A scrap of paper on the floor next to the dining table. I reach to pick it up, and seeing Arthur's handwriting is a jolt. The paper is torn from the spiral notepad we kept on the go for his endless lists, and on the top line, in pencil, he's written, "Find D." Is it new, this note? Arthur's final list? I almost laugh. Then I pull out a chair and sit down. Find D. What does it mean? Find D. It could be a note for me, or something he was writing for himself. Is D a person or a thing? And if it's a thing... Ollie's getting under my feet, almost tripping me up, so I take hold of his face between my hands. He doesn't like it, tries to shake me off. "It's about Arthur," I say, and he tilts his head to one side. "He's gone, for good. I'm sorry, I know how you loved him." There's no knowing what he understands, but he slinks away from me and into the corner of the room, curls up there like he needs to be alone. Today might be the first day we've had him that he won't get a walk. Arthur would go out in all weathers even if he wasn't feeling good.
"He relies on us,"
he said once.
"We're all he's got."
And now he only has me, the one he was never all that keen on. I'm standing by the kettle waiting for the low roar of its boil when I think of Dot. Could he have meant find Dot? And if he did, why did he leave me guessing by not writing her whole name? Or was he interrupted while writing? I run through the people we know for other names starting with D, but there are none. Find D. I repeat it in my head over and over, as if with enough repetition the meaning will emerge like the sun from behind a cloud. He mentioned Dot at the market, and then again last night, for the first time in years. Reminisced about the days we spent together as a four. Could she have been on his mind? Could he have known he was dying and wanted to suggest that I find my friend after he'd gone? Was he giving me permission? Although, really, why did I need it? In my mind, I sometimes get muddled about Dot leaving. I think it was just after Bill's death. But the reality was that there was almost a year in between. I lost most of it to grief. But she was there, visiting the house, checking in on me and on Mother. Mother saw her as a daughter, so convinced was she that Dot and Bill would have married. Sometimes she brought flowers, tulips or carnations. Mother would stand at the kitchen saying how thoughtful Dot was, how much she appreciated her. It was actually in the run-up to my wedding that she disappeared. I hadn't asked her to be my bridesmaid yet, but it probably went unsaid. Was it hard for her to see me getting ready to be married, when we'd all thought she would be first? Or was it more than that? Did she have a reason for not wanting the wedding to go ahead? I used to meet her on the corner of Halfpenny Street, and we'd walk to work at the typing pool together, and then one Wednesday she wasn't there. It happened sometimes if one of us caught a cold or came down with a tummy bug. So I went on ahead, thought nothing of it. But when I got to work, there was a new girl in Dot's place, and there were whispers that she wasn't coming back. I thought it was ridiculous, just a rumour. Dot would be tucked up in bed with a bowl of warming chicken soup on a tray, her nose red and her throat sore. By the end of my shift, I was tired and hungry, but I called in on the way home to put my mind at rest, to find out whether she'd be up to coming in tomorrow, whether I should wait on the corner like always. But her mother answered the door and said she was gone. "Gone?" I asked. "Gone where?" "London." Dot's mother, Irene, was a small, wiry woman, but you didn't cross her. She'd been known to go into the carpenter's and drag her husband out by his hair. She stood in the doorway with a firm look on her face, and she didn't ask me in. "But she would have told me," I said. Irene shrugged, and it felt unkind. "It was last minute," she said. "I've got a sister there, and she asked if Dot wanted to go and stay." "So it's a holiday?" "No, it's not a holiday. She's going to make a life there, find a job. She's always liked the city." Dot and I walked across fields together, picked flowers for our hair. Was she a city girl? There'd been something I had to admit, some sort of yearning I caught sometimes in her eyes when she thought I wasn't looking. But I'd always thought that was about love, about Bill. Was it about being in the wrong place, in a life that felt too small, that didn't fit her properly? A week or so later I called again. Irene huffed and puffed, but she gave me the address, and that night I wrote a long letter telling Dot everything she'd missed. How Elsie Jacks at work had been sacked for sneaking off to smoke in the toilet. How my cousin Margaret was having a baby, and I was hoping to have a week off work to help her out in the early days. How Mother was starting to do a little better, was starting to hum and whistle as she moved about the house again for the first time since Bill. I didn't say I missed her, but that message surely hummed beneath the words, between the lines. I put a stamp on it and posted it off the following morning. And I never heard back. I didn't give up, though. I wrote another 3 or 4. And it was weeks before I stopped checking the post in the mornings, sure there would be something for me. Should I have been clearer about the gaping hole she left in my life? Would it have made a difference? I talked to Arthur about looking for her, back then, when it seemed possible to think of getting on a train and seeking her out. But he was always dead against it. Said it was her decision to go and to not reply to my letters, and we should leave her be. It always made me wonder whether he had something to hide. Something Dot had taken away with her that he didn't want bringing back. And now, when it's too late, is he really encouraging me to do it? Is he admitting he was wrong? I move about the house, unable to settle. Ollie seems equally discombobulated, but we don't comfort each other because we never have. We give one another space instead. My head is full of Arthur and Dot and Bill and being young, and a time that felt like it was golden. No, that's not